Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It's 3rd of June, 2004, approximately 11:30 a.m. The interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Arthur Warren Erbe. I was born in Rockville Center, Long Island. And what was the third one?
When?
November 17th, 1943.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
High school graduate from Greenwood Central School, and that was it. When I graduated from, shortly after I graduated from high school, I worked in the summer, and in the fall of 1962, I joined the Navy.
Okay, why did you enlist, and why did you select the Navy?
Basically, a friend of mine, we joined on a buddy system. A fellow in town that I went to school with by the name of William Kelly. We joined on a buddy system, went to boot camp together. And I guess the reason that I joined was I wasn't interested in going to college. I didn't have the marks in high school to go to college. Didn't have the finances to go to school. And heard so much about the training and education that you could get in the Navy, and basically that's why I went. And I wanted to get my military service done early and get it over with.
Okay. Where did you go for your training, and could you talk a little bit, describe your training?
Yeah, after we went in, we left Albany by train, took a train to Great Lakes Naval Training Center in just north of Chicago, and took boot camp at Great Lakes Training Center. And I can't exactly remember, it seems like I might have been 12 weeks of basic training. We did have a Christmas leave. They let us go home for Christmas for, seems like it was about a week, and come back, finished. And then from there, I went right to Machinist mate school, which was right on the base there at Great Lakes. Went to Machinist mate school, which was probably 8 weeks. I kind of forget what that was, the length of it. Graduated from there, and then stayed on the base for a while. Did some secretarial work for the commander at the school, and did some typing and stuff for him. Went home in June, it was, for I think I had 2 weeks vacation, and then went to Newport and was assigned to USS Kankakee AO 39, and I met the Kankakee at the tanker pier, Melville, Rhode Island, which is Newport, Rhode Island area. And I was on the Kankakee for about 3.5 years. The rest of my career in the Navy was 4 years. Then we did service. The cruises that we took were, the areas that we hit were basically the North Atlantic. We went down almost as far as the Panama Canal. We went over into the Mediterranean. We did a 6-month med cruise in 1964. And then basically that was our area of operations. Refueling all the time. It wasn't a very glorified job, refueling. It was a lot of long hours, sometimes 12, sometimes even 24 hours refueling at a time. Long, arduous hours, day and night. Night refueling was pretty exciting when you had an aircraft carrier who would come alongside and refuel, or sometimes take fuel from an aircraft carrier, the USS Roosevelt and some of the bigger carriers, and they'd hold flight operations while we were refueling, which was, especially at night, was quite a sight to see.
Now, why would you take fuel off a carrier?
Although we were a fleet tanker, and I can't remember how much fuel we hold, but we were a pretty good-sized tanker. This ship was, at the time, it was 500 feet long, 501 feet, and although we held a lot of fuel, sometimes we wouldn't have enough different specific types of fuel, whether it be aviation gas or JP5 or just bunker fuel and stuff for the boilers. If they or us was high or low, we transfer back and forth, whatever the need may be.
So you carried more than one type of fuel?
Oh yeah. I think as I remember it, we carried JP5, which was a jet propulsion fuel. I believe they used that in jet engines. I wasn't in that department, so I don't know much about it. Then there was aviation gasoline, which I believe they used in aircraft engines, probably a piston engine. And I'm not sure of that. And then of course the main fuel was oil for the steam boilers.
Any incidents or anything?
Yeah, we had one thing that was kind of interesting. A couple of things probably. We were down the Caribbean refueling the USS Intrepid aircraft carrier, and again it was a long hour after hour operation, and I was on break at the time from the engine room. I was machinist mate and worked in the engine room down main control, and I was up on the avgas tank, which was way up front on the front of the ship, almost up by the anchor windlass, getting some air. And of course the carrier's right alongside of you, maybe anywhere from 100 to 150 feet, 75 to 150 feet away, depends on how they're coming close. Well, of course she's high. Her flight deck is way the hell above our deck, and so operations are going on. We're watching the operation, and I'm looking up, and all of a sudden it looks like she's getting closer. She's getting closer. She's getting closer. I mean, it happens all the time. Then you swing back apart. But she kept coming closer and closer, and I was up there with an old bosun's mate. He was an old warrant officer, an old Mustang, and of course he knew what was going on. He knew we were in trouble. So how was it they did? Oh, they sounded the collision at sea alarm, and the gongs go off, and then they have a mechanism where they can disconnect the fuel lines in a hurry. Whether it was gas or oil at the time, so they all dropped in the sea so that they could, stop the refueling operation. Anyway, she drifted right in close to us, and they had the hell did they call that? It was a platform. It was an elevator that they'd take the aircraft from the hangar deck up to the flight deck, and she ripped a hole in our side, probably, I can't remember exactly, probably 20 or 30 feet wide, and but it was above the water line, so we were safe there. Like I said, it was her flight platform, the sharp square corner that ripped a hole in us, and nobody got hurt, as I remember. And so all hell broke loose, and they had to anchor out, and the admiral came over, and there was a big inquiry and stuff like that. And at the time, I never heard as I remember, I never heard if anybody was at fault or what happened. But after a while, I started going to some of the ship reunions. They have them once a year at different places, and we got looking at some of the old log books and so on, and talking to some of the guys that were there. And the aircraft carrier was to blame. I don't remember any specifics about it, but that was pretty exciting. We had to turn around and go back up to Boston. We were down around Cuba, and we were in the yards for a short time, maybe a month, getting repairs done to it. That was pretty exciting. We were in Newport one time, another thing that was kind of an incident, and of course it seems like this happens all the time today, but at the time we had a bomb scare. Someone, we were tied along the Pier 2, I think it was, in Newport, and there was a couple of tankers, and I think it was the Acadia, it was a repair ship. Three of us tied side by side, and it was on a weekend, a Saturday or Sunday, just basic cruise. And somebody called in a bomb scare, and of course we didn't know there was a bomb going to go off or what the hell it was all about. And we had to right away, get the ships underway and get out to sea in case something if it did, of course, if it went off, or if it was a bomb, and it went off while we were tied up alongside another tanker and so on, there'd be a lot more damage than if you're by yourself out to sea. So anyway, that was pretty exciting. We got underway as fast as we could, got the hell out of there.
I take it it was just a scare, nothing happened.
That's true, yeah. Nothing ever became of it. There was a lot of inquiries and stuff like that. The best they could do at the time, of course, it's so different today. They handled it the best they could, and I don't know whether somebody didn't want to get underway or somebody's girlfriend or what it may have been. I don't know what it could have been. I don't know. But nothing became of that.
Now, in your form that you sent in, you said that your ship was an older ship when it was built, or?
Yeah, it was the SS Kalina. It was a privately owned a tanker, and it was converted in 1942 to the USS Kankakee to a fleet tanker. And I can't remember a lot about the whole history of the ship, but she saw quite a lot of action during World War II. She was over in the Pacific, and I wish I knew more about the history of the action that she was in over in the Pacific during the war. But she was very busy, I know, by reading the logs, and earned quite a few battle ribbons while she was over there in stars. So it saw a fair amount of action when it was in World War II. And then they put her out of commission, and then they put her back in commission again, I think probably around maybe 1960 or something like that, when the Cuban crisis started coming about. And when I got on the ship in 1962, she had just come back from, I think it was like in January of 1962, something around that time. She came back from she was on the Cuban crisis and the blockade down there. So she had just come back from Cuba and was back a short time, just a month or two, and that's when I went aboard her. I think I went aboard in June of 62, and I think she got back in the late spring of 62. I remember when I went on the ship, she'd just come back and hadn't had a chance to clean up, and of course everything was, it was rusty, and you can tell when a ship's been to sea for quite a while. She's in pretty tough shape, but it needed a lot of painting and a lot of repairs and stuff. Yeah, it was, for a fleet tanker, she'd been around the world quite a few times.
Now, you said she needed a lot of repairs being a machinist mate. Did you have to have, what did you have to do?
Yeah, down in the engine room is where I worked, and it was a steam propulsion type of a system. We had a single screw. Our top speed might have been 17 or 18 knots. Had two boilers and one main engine. And when we went into the yards, usually the yard birds or the construction people in the shipyards did most of the work. We'd tear down the main engine, and there was stuff that we would do. We'd rebuild pumps and stuff while we were there. We'd be taking pumps out. They'd take it over on the base and rebuild them and bring them back. In the same way with the boilers, they replaced boiler tubes and a lot of the bearings and stuff like that on the ship. We were in the yards in Bayonne, New Jersey, Brooklyn Navy Yard, and then we were up in Boston, in the yards in Boston for quite a while. 3 different major overhauls. And then we'd get things back together, and they would usually send us on a shakedown cruise or a good test cruise. Usually we went down to, quite often we went to San Juan and Guantanamo Bay. That's where we did most of the refueling. And a lot of refueling off the Atlantic coast too.
You said you had an embarrassing moment while in Greece.
Oh yeah. I won't go into too many details. We pulled into, it was in 1964, we pulled into Rhodes, Greece, and a beautiful place to visit. And we anchored out in the harbor, near where the classes of roads was supposed to have been. And we took a little Liberty launch back and forth. So we're standing on the pier waiting for, a bunch of us sailors standing on the pier waiting for the launch to come back in and ship and take us back out to the ship. So while we were standing there waiting along the pier there was a lot of vendors selling, a lot of pottery. Pottery was one of the things that the people over there were making a lot of this handmade pottery and hand painting it and firing it and so on. So I better be careful how I describe some of this stuff. But there was stuff on the they had big plates and pottery and things like that. And they were pretty detailed about human anatomy. And so nobody there was, I didn't hear anybody speaking English. You couldn't understand anybody. It was all French and, Italian, and no one spoke English. At least I didn't think so. So I hollered to a guy down, he was just a table down from me. And I got cussing and stuff, and, nobody paid any attention. They didn't know what you were talking about. And this lady stood right next to me, a little old lady, a gray-haired lady. She turns and she says to me, she says, "Oh, you American sailors? Whereabouts you from?" And I just finished cussing pretty bad, and I was so embarrassed. I think it was the most embarrassed I've ever been in my life. I just never expected it, All of a sudden she turned like, "Oh, you American sailors? Where are you from?" But that was very embarrassing.
Now, you said you were involved in the Dominican Republic crisis. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can't even remember when that was, Mike, what year it was. But it was, there was some sort of an uprising going on in the Dominican Republic. I remember they sent, it was a very small thing. I think they might have sent 300 or 400 Marines in or something like that to settle whatever the problem.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Is that what it was?
65.
And we went down there and weren't told, as I recall, where we were going or what was going on. We had no idea what it was about until we got down there, and then the captain came on and told us that we were there to support some of the landings that were going on. So we were just refueling some of the personnel, landing craft and stuff that was down there at the time. Weren't there very long, as I recall. It was a fairly short-term thing, and historically I can't remember too much about it. I just remember it being some kind of a political uprising or something to that effect. But that was as far as any action was concerned, that's as close as the 4 years that I was in, that was the closest I ever came to that.
Okay.
Always on the east coast.
When were you discharged?
It was, I wish I looked and had some dates for you. I believe it was in October of 1966. And what happened was they came through with an early discharge bonus for some of the guys, and I fell into that category. So instead of having 4 years of active duty, I ended up with, I got a 2-week cut. So I was just short of having full 4 years active duty.
You weren't anywhere near Vietnam at all?
No, everything was, we never went through the Panama Canal. Everything was on the East Coast, which, that's the way it was. The ship was assigned to the Atlantic Fleet, and they, when I got off the ship, of course I still kept in contact with a lot of the guys, and it was, I think it was probably within a few months after I got off, she took a North Atlantic cruise and ended up in Scotland and in England and Germany and some of hit some nice, real nice ports. I wish I could have made that cruise, but I wasn't going to re-enlist or extend for that.
Did you join any veterans organizations after you?
After I got out, not right after I got out. It was quite a few years after I got out. In fact, I'm 60 years old now, and I'd say I belong to the American Legion and the VFW there in Greenwich, and I belonged to them probably about 8 or 10 years. So just more or less just recently I joined up with those. Those are the two organizations.
And you did say you keep in contact with...
Yeah, the Kankakee, the tanker that I was on, has an alumni group, and we get together once a year. They're getting together, I think maybe around the 25th of June down in Charleston, South Carolina is where they're going to meet this year. Last year they were out in Oklahoma City. The year before that they were out in South Dakota. One year it's on the East Coast, next year it's on the other side of the Mississippi.
Do you know what happened to the ship?
Yeah, I got off in '66. She stayed commissioned, and in 1968 they decommissioned it, and as my understanding, they sold it for scrap. Of course, it was built about 1942, so you know, it lived its life.
Did you ever stay in contact with any particular individuals that were with you, or
Well, like I said,
outside of the reunion?
well, of course, the guys that were in the that go to the reunion are the people that I keep in contact with.
Okay.
There's a fellow right up in Middletown Springs that I talk to probably every month or two, and we get together for coffee and dinner once in a while. So he's probably one of the closest ones. I don't know if you know Wayne Harrington there in Greenwich. This was kind of an interesting situation. Well, Wayne Harrington and myself graduated from high school together, and you know, after high school we parted ways. I went in the Navy, and I hadn't seen him for quite a long time. And I got discharged in '66, and I was down to the old station in Greenwich here one night, and he came in, and I asked him what he was doing and so forth, and he said, well, I pretty near got drafted, so he said I went and joined the Navy. And I said, well, I was in the Navy. I just got out, you know, not too long ago. This was real close time after I got out. And I said, where are you located? He says, well, I'm on a tanker in Newport, Rhode Island. I said, oh, I just got off a tanker. What tanker are you on? He says, the Kankakee. I says, well, I just left there, you know. Well, that was kind of an ironic situation. But I see Wayne all the time, you know. He's down in my shop, and I buy wood from him and so on. Of course, we grew up together. There was another fellow from Greenwich that was on the Kankakee. His name was Adams. I never really knew him very well. I used to work with his brother, Dave, when I worked for Niagara Mohawk. And he was on the Kankakee back in the 50s, but I never really knew the guy. I'd see him around town once in a while and chat with him. But I keep in contact with fairly actively, I'd say every 6 months or so on the phone with probably 5 or 6 of the guys.
How do you think your time in the Navy had changed or affected your life?
I don't know. That's a tough question, I guess, Mike. It's you know, it was probably some of the best years of my life. Enjoyed it very much. Enjoyed traveling and seeing the world. Certainly enjoyed doing my part as you know, for my country. Feel strongly about that. It was I learned a lot. You know, learned a lot of mechanical things. I was fairly mechanical before I went in. That's how I ended up being a machinist mate. Very good experience, and you know, I certainly highly recommend it. Although my son joined the Army, but yeah, it was a great experience, no question about it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your interview.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you have some photographs?
Yes.
Yes. Well, this is my boot camp picture. It was taken in boot camp in 1962.
So you were about 18, 19 at the time
Yeah.
you enlisted?
Yeah,
Okay.
19.
What rank were you in that? I saw the 2 stripes.
That was a seaman apprentice.
Okay,
And then when you graduate from machinist mate school, become a seaman. And then when you take your examinations for machinist mate, become 3rd class, and then 2nd class, which is E5. So, and then just before I got out, I passed my 1st class and chief test, and you had to have passed all the tests, and which I did, and they would have made me 1st class or E6 if I re-enlisted, but you had to have 4 years. And just before I left the ship, the executive officer called me up to his stateroom and interviewed me for re-enlisting, and he said, you know, he very much wanted me to re-enlist. There's bonuses and so on. He says, if you'll agree to re-enlist for, I forgot what it was, 4 years or 6 years at the time, they would promise me any location that I wanted, and as soon as the 4-year anniversary came up, I'd be promoted to E6, which is 1st class, which is at that time was pretty fast promotion in the Navy in my particular rank. These other pictures are taken on the ship. This one here is kind of hard to see, but it's me at the main controls on the ship. It's what they call the throttle board.
okay.
And this other one here is a friend of mine, one of the guys that I keep in touch with, and myself. We're taking my chronometer readings.
Okay, which one are you, the left or the right?
This one here,
Okay,
here left.
okay.
This other fellow's name is Richard Barzak. I keep in touch with him all the time. He got out of the Navy, did went to flight school, became some kind of a private pilot for a little while. Then he became an air traffic controller, and I keep in touch with him quite a lot. And I was just talking to him back on this 911 thing. He was telling me he was in supervisory department field end. He was a supervisor of a bunch of air traffic controllers, and he said it was the strangest thing to look up on the boards, they call them, and see not a spot, not an airplane in the sky. He said that was the weirdest thing in all his time. He was air traffic controller for some 35 years. And what a strange situation that was, he said.
Thank you.
Thank you.